Welcome to the American Valor Podcast. Today's guest is a proven leader who spent over 3 decades serving our nation at the highest levels of the United States Navy. Retired Vice Admiral Thomas J. Moore brings a legacy of service, sacrifice, and leadership that continues to impact leaders far beyond the military. Admiral, it is my honor to spend this time with you today.
Well, thank you, Sanchez. It's my honor to be with you, and also with such a great organization as the Bob Feller Active Valor Foundation. Just what you're doing for our veterans is incredible, and what Bob Feller did in his wonderful life was fantastic as well.
I completely agree, and I thank you for that. Now, before we get into the gist of this conversation, Admiral, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about you, what you're doing now, and
Sure.
these days.
Yeah. So I'm a second generation naval officer. My dad was in the Navy, so I was born in 1959. Traveled all over the place. Back then, you moved about every 2 to 3 years, so I pretty much lived all over the country growing up, and really admire my father, who's just turned 90, still alive, and was my hero growing up. And so when the opportunity came, and I was getting ready to go to college, I had a chance to. I had been admitted to the Naval Academy, and I ended up going there, and kind of the rest is history for 39 years. Kind of the interesting thing is my father did not go to the Naval Academy. He went to OCS, Officer Candidate School in Newport, kind of a 90-day wonder. And he went because he had a very high draft number coming out of college in 1958. And there was really no prior military service in his family. So, one of the standing jokes in our family is when I went to the Naval Academy is he said he lost half his good jokes. So, yeah, so went to the Naval Academy, and then spent 39 great years in the Navy serving the country. And every tour was fantastic. People always ask me, what was your favorite tour? In general, my answer is whatever the last job I was in was my favorite tour. And retired in 2020, and then I've been working for a company called HII, Huntington Ingalls Industries. We build aircraft carriers and submarines and destroyers and amphibious ships, and we also do a bunch of all domain mission technologies types of stuff, unmanned electronic warfare, that sort of stuff, kind of warfighting end of the business. But I spent a lot of time in my career building aircraft carriers, so it's a great company with a lot of the values and integrity that I valued in the Navy, and this company has it as well. And shipbuilding, as many of your listeners may know, is a really big issue today. The fleet's not big enough to execute all the missions that we have today, and we're down at about 290 ships. Probably should be at about 375. And with the president's Golden Fleet initiative, we've got an opportunity to really regrow the size of the fleet. So I think I'm very excited about the company that I'm working for, and it's an opportunity to kind of carry on what I did in the 39 years I was in the Navy. So, uh, two kids. One's a nurse practitioner who lives down in Charlottesville, Virginia. She's just got married, and my son works for Lockheed Martin. So neither one of my kids followed me in my footsteps in the Navy, but both. One works for Lockheed Martin, working on submarine systems, and my daughter's a nurse practitioner. So they followed in their own kind of line of service there, and so I'm very proud of both of them. So, and last I would say, huge St. Louis Cardinal baseball fan. Been First baseball game I ever saw was 1967 at the old Shea Stadium between the Cardinals and the Mets. The Mets were horrible back then, and the Cardinals won the World Series in '67 and lost in '68. I think I cried my heart out when they were up 3 games to 1 and lost in 7 games to the Tigers and Mickey Lolich. But so I've been a huge baseball fan ever since. So, which is why I'm tickled to death that I was invited to be on the board of the Bob Feller Active Valor Foundation, and looking forward to the conversation with you today, Senior. So thank you for asking.
Yes, outstanding, and thank you for your service and what you do now. I remember my days as a pre-com sailor of the USS Iwo Jima,
There you
so
go.
I understand the whole shipbuilding part when you're watching this big evolution of the creation of a ship, and you're part of it, right? So it's thank you for that. And hey, similar to you, Admiral, my children did not follow in my footsteps, and they've made their own road, and hopefully the grandchildren or maybe great grandchildren will do.
Yeah. I mean, I think military service has got to be something you do it not because your parents want you to do it. It's because it's you want to do. And the people that have the longest careers are the people that do it because that's what they chose to do. But I'm super proud of my kids anyway. And but it's not for everybody. But I'm so glad I did. And I will. A lot of people say, if you know what you know now, would you do it again? Absolutely, 100%. Yeah,
I agree. I agree. Now, folks, at the Bob Feller Active Battle Foundation, we strive to educate, support, and recognize by instilling the timeless values of service, sacrifice, legacy, and citizenship. Admiral, based on the pillars mentioned, I would like to start today's conversation with service. Can you
sure.
share a moment when your commitment to service was tested and what you learned from it?
Yeah, Let me give you a couple. One is kind of humorous, and then one's a very serious one. So, you know, I mentioned to you earlier that I enjoyed every minute of the 39 years and the 4 years of the academy. It's actually not completely true because the first day at the Naval Academy, which is induction day, it's a pretty tough day, and it's a transition out of the civilian world. And even though my father had been in the Navy, I don't know that I was quite prepared for what I was about to get myself into in Plebe Summer. And so, back then, this is summer of 1977, you didn't have computers, so you carried shot records around with you, and those were important to have because if you didn't have a shot record, you would get shot. So the first thing they do when you on induction day at the Naval Academy, they give you a final, kind of medical checkup to make sure you're ready to be inducted in. So one of the things is to check to see whether you have all your shots. And so I'm standing there and I said, well, I'm a Navy brat and I'm up to date on my shots. And the nurse says, oh, he needs the following 5 shots. And the next thing I know, they've got air guns. I get 3 shots on one arm, 2 shots in the other. And they get down to the end of the line and they say, Thomas A. Moore. And I said, no, Thomas J. Moore. And they go, oh, you have the wrong shot record. So I said to the doctor, he just gave me 5 shots I didn't need. He goes, don't worry, it won't hurt you. And so that night, lying in the dormitory at the Naval Academy in typical July, 90 degrees, 90% humidity, no air conditioning back then, kind of like being on ships like you and I did a long time ago. No breeze, lying on this bed in a pool of sweat. My arms all swollen up, can't roll over. And after being yelled at all day, I remember thinking to myself, what have I just gotten myself into? But the next morning I woke up, I had, and we'll talk about this later, a great leader. I had great leaders. And the next morning, it all went away. And I tell people, that only that one day did I ever say, did I do the right thing? And after that, I was off and going. So a little bit of humor. So, but into your question on commitment to service. So the other one's a little bit more serious. I was in 1989. I was the weapons officer on a destroyer, the USS Coyningham, Coynyngam, is a DDG 17, and we were off the coast of Virginia just doing some drills, and I was the officer of the deck at the time, and we had a major fire on board, a Lost Bravo fire in the Fort Fire. It's so severe that there was some times where I didn't think, we were just out doing independent steam, but I didn't think we were going to make it. And the fire really split the ship in half. Um, we ended up losing one officer, the guy I had relieved as the officer of the deck, just prior to that, a young officer with, a wife and 2 young kids. And my wife at the time was overseas and didn't know what was going on. And had 17 people seriously injured. And so, we're all, particularly when we're young, we kind of think we're bulletproof, but nothing's going to happen to us. And so, that in the aftermath of the fire, I was the, I was the second senior department head, the most senior one, a guy named Pope Gordon had been killed in the fire, and the XO had been burned badly in the fire, and so I was ended up as the acting XO, and I'm pretty young, and the CO at the time was, he took it pretty hard, and so for about 2 or 3 weeks period, I was pretty much the CO of this ship as a lieutenant, and it was a lot, it was a lot on my plate. And when it came back, when it came back to when we eventually decommissioned the ship and it was time to go back to sea, um, I had to think pretty hard. Hey, is this something that I really want to do going forward based on everything that I had just gone through? I wanted to have a family. I wanted, and in the end of the day, um, I decided that yes, I wanted to press forward, but I pressed forward in a different area. I became what's called an engineering duty officer, and was a ship designer, ship construction person. But it was a life changing event for me. Um, One to lose a close friend that you had just been on the bridge with, and then to be in a significant in a fire and have people get significantly injured coming out of it. And for those people who have never been in combat or in some things like that, it's a new thing for us. And so yeah, I think that, when we get tested like that, it causes us to, to question, how committed are we to this? But in the end of the day, for me, um, despite all the challenges from the fire and all the lessons learned, I think it redoubled my commitment to what I wanted, and this is something I wanted to do. But it did highlight as a young officer, hey, you're not bulletproof. Don't do stupid stuff. But at the same time, you can't control everything that goes on. So, you've got to come in eyes wide open, do the best job you can every day. And then I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, and the plane went about 50 feet right underneath where I was sitting, knocked me out of the back of my chair onto the floor. And we thought it was a bomb. Um, that was another kind of, day where you have to sit back. And then I was in the Washington Navy Yard as a two-star when uh, we had an active shooter event with a guy that just came on, just walked in and brought a rifle in and killed 12 different people. And I was supposed to be in a meeting across the street. But the funny thing is, looking back on the fire and having gone through that, and as I said to you earlier, you know, in life you can't control everything. You get up every morning. Um, you're committed to what you do. The best advice I would give people is get up every day, do the best job you can with the God given talents you have, and make sure every single day that you tell the people you love that you love them, because you don't know from one day to the next. There are things that are completely out of your control. Like I said, don't do dumb stuff. But the 9/11 experience in the Pentagon, I could show you a picture of the hole right underneath where my office was, and the shooting at the Navy Yard. Um, those were not nearly. I mean, they were horrible events, but I had reconciled what service was, back as when I was a lieutenant, and so those, neither one of those events, caused me any pause that I wanted to continue to serve. In fact, and probably in the opposite direction. So there's a couple of examples. One's a little bit more lighthearted, and I know the second one is pretty long-winded, but a serious discussion. And I think people need to understand when you talk about service that um, you're going to take some risk, and if you love what you're doing and you work hard every day, then those risks are worth taking.
Yes, Admiral, that great examples of the swath of opportunities for you to question what is service, how you relate to service, even on comical day, which we know we all experience
Yeah,
that first 72 hours.
it
We're
wasn't
all
funny at the time, but I'm sure you going through boot camp and stuff. There were days you go, "What the heck am I doing here?" So
right. You're getting sent out to get a ID 10T form, and you're like, what? Come to find out it spells idiot. But, it's just the things that help us to see what place in our world, what place in our current circumstances, especially with service, how committed are you? Now, some, you know, kind of make a choice there and say, okay, I'm going to do my point, I'm out. But there are some similar to you that took those opportunities
yeah,
as, you know, uh, my level of commitment has just doubled, tripled,
Right.
10 times.
If you ever had a chance to, so Admiral McCraven, who led the raid against Osama bin Laden, who's famous for a speech he gave at the University of Texas when he was a four-star, is better known as the "Make My Bed" speech. If it or "Make Your Bed" speech, if anybody that's listening to the podcast has never watched it, you should. And one of the things he talks about, going through SEAL training was, once every 2 weeks they'd have a formal uniform inspection, and you would spend hours getting ready for it. And no matter how hard you worked, no matter how hard you tried, they would find something wrong. And the penalty for finding something wrong was they would make you go into the cold California surf in your dress uniform and then come out and roll around in sand. And it was affectionately being known, what was known as being a sugar cookie. And he said, the people that complained about how unfair life was or how unfair it was uh, missed the point. The point was you were never going to be perfect. You were never going to get it right. And sometimes life's not fair. And the question is, when that happens to you, what do you do? Do you spend your time complaining about it? Or, when you have failure, do you pick yourself back up and get back at it? Because as he says, if you want to change the world, don't be afraid of being a sugar cookie. So this commitment to service sometimes is going to have some bumps along the way, and your ability to stand up, brush yourself off, and get back into it is, really a sign of character and commitment that I think is really important. And so many of the men and women today serving our country do exactly that. And I know you probably did the same when you were
Yes, for sure. And your example of the fire and both the 9/11 and the active shooter brings me to the point of sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrifice that we servicemen and women give, have to account for. How do leaders reconcile the tension between mission demands and personal life? Because I know
in.
that there's a big struggle there.
Well, it's a great question. I think, you have to recognize, the mission comes first. And I think if you're, going back to your first question about commitment, if you're committed to that, you're going to understand that. But there is a balance. And, you know, you, know, to me, if you're people that are the most successful are the ones that can balance that tension between the work requirements, the war fighting requirements, the deployments, and their personal life, in particular with a family. Um, you can do both, and the people that I have found over the years that were the best at it had struck that balance between both, and they needed both. And you know, as you get more senior and the jobs get more demanding, um, sometimes I would always tell people if your measure of success or your metric is, how many, or if you're just measuring how many hours a week you're working or how many months a year you're deployed to determine whether you have balance in your life, you're destined to fail, because as we get more senior and we get more responsibility, and as world events unfold, that those demands on our time are going to go up. The question is, what do you do with the time that you're not at work or you're not deployed? Do you have something else that you enjoy doing? Do you have a faith? Do you like religion? Do you like music? Do you like to play golf like me? Do you have baseball? Do you have family? And so I think the best leaders that I've seen, recognize that there's always going to be this tension between the requirements of the job and what we do in the military. And it's not the same as a 9 to 5 job. There are tensions that you're just not going to face anywhere else. I mean, I can't imagine. You look at the sailors that are on the USS Gerald R. Ford right now, which is one of the carriers that I helped build. She's going to be on an 11-month deployment. And think about that. That's a long time to be away from your family. And when they left, even worse is when they left, they didn't think they were going to go on for 11 months. And I think most of us that have been in the military, if we know, if they said to us, hey, you're going to be gone for 9 months, you can mentally prepare yourself for that. Okay, you deal with it. But when you say, hey, you're going to be gone for 6 and now it becomes 11, that becomes pretty hard. So Um, my advice to everybody out there is one, you got to recognize the tensions of the job you have, but find balance in your life, find family, find faith, find something else that you like to do that allows you to unplug periodically from the tensions that you have in the job. And the people that are most successful can balance those two things out, recognizing that, depending on the job or as you get more senior, that you may be spending more time away from family. You may be working a lot more hours than you did when you were, a first class petty officer, or compared to a senior chief, or a lieutenant, a 3 star compared to when you're a lieutenant. But you can make it work, and then I think we do fall back on this commitment to service, right? That you had on the first one as kind of a foundational element of why we do it.
Absolutely. And a lot of conversations need to be had to set the tone for that, being able to deal with that tension
Yeah.
because,
So I think I think you just hit the nail on the head. A lot of conversations have to be had, and it's important to have those conversations with your family. Lay those expectations out. Even if you're not married, talking to your parents and say, "Hey, here's what I'm about to go do." Make sure everybody understands, and have those conversations. And if you can do that, then ultimately you'll be successful. If the family's not on board with it, it makes it really really hard. I think that the people that have the most tension are the ones where they haven't really resolved, um, how do you go do this. My father was in the Navy for 28 years, and back then he was in Vietnam a couple times. He deployed several other times, and it was, while we missed him and we knew he was gone. My mother, really made sure that as a family that we were close knit, and that we knew Dad was gone, but she made sure the family stayed together. She was the glue, and that's critically important, to have that support group there. And I think she was such a good role model growing up, that's what I always made sure going forward, that I had somebody that I could count on to help me you know provide that balance between the tension of work and the family side of the business.
yes, home base is so important. And I hope that everyone that is serving now has that type of level of support because it's needed, definitely, especially on a extended deployment that no one was waiting or
Yep.
anticipating for. But it does happen. I remember when we deployed to the Persian Gulf, it was a 6 month, turned to 9 months very quickly.
Yep.
And then at the end, we were on the way back. But still, that home base support is so critical. Now, when we serve, legacy normally doesn't come up. I don't remember anybody asking me at E1, hey, what's your legacy going to be like? And even at the E8 level, when you're command senior chief and you got 1,000 people in your organization, legacy doesn't come up. It's just a part of service that we
Yep.
don't touch on. But legacy does happen. It happens after, usually after service, that you hear some things in the rumbling. Hey, they're still talking about you. Hey, this lesson that you taught. Hey, these sailors are now senior chiefs. So, can you share a
Yep.
story where you realized your leadership had a lasting impact on someone else?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. For most of us, unless we're the president of the United States or something like that, our greatest legacy is what we leave behind. The people, our children, or the people that work for us. So, I've been, in 39 years in the Navy, I've been very blessed with having great people work for me. I mean, and ultimately, I would credit a lot of my success to being good at picking good people to work for me and turning them loose. But it's the greatest satisfaction that I had in my entire career, um, was seeing people that worked for me go and be successful, or call me up and ask for my advice, or call me up and tell me that this is what they were going to go do. And so, just too specific, I had I was a lieutenant on the USS Virginia, the main propulsion assistant. I had a young officer, guy, that was working for me, who, he just it was service wasn't, at the end of the day, wasn't in the cards for him, and he did his 5 years and served honorably, did a great job, but ended up getting out. He wanted to start a family and then became a very successful businessman. And years later, he sent me this video clip of he was given a talk at some big symposium of the people that were in his business, and he said, he sent it to me. He said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I want to share this with you." And somebody had asked him about, well, how did you get here? How have you been so successful? And he went back and said, I want to tell you a story about this Lieutenant Moore that I worked for when I was, 20 years ago. And he was a tough, demanding boss, but fair. And he set extremely high standards. And he taught me the value of setting high standards. And it's what's made me successful in my career. And, so when you hear somebody 20 years later reach back to you and say, you know what, you made a difference in my life, um, that really does resonate. And then, as a flag officer, you have a lot of young officers working for you as executive assistants or flag aides that travel with you. They keep you out of trouble. They make sure you're in the right uniform, where you're on schedule. In fact, when I retired from the Navy, I told, after my first year, I was talking to my boss, and he said, so we were going through my goals for the year, and I said, okay, my goal this year is to be on time for half the meetings. And because the first year I was late for every meeting because I was so used to somebody knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, Admiral, 5 minutes to your next meeting." And my wife said, "If you think I'm going to do that, it's not going to happen." Same thing if I had an IT problem. But so one of the great joys of my life is that the five lieutenants that work, and you only keep them in the job for about a year because we're running them pretty hard. When I was a 3-star, those five lieutenants are now commanders, and they're in command, and they reach back to me all the time. So to see people that worked for you, that enjoyed working for you, and that have taken, that you influenced positively or negatively. I had a CO that was one of my COs, we won't go into that, was so bad. I just said, boy, what I learned from that, I will never do that. But then, the positive influence of watching these kids now become successful. And the one guy got out of the Navy, was successful, but these five kids that are now commanders out there serving today, it's a real blessing. And one time when I was a baby 1-star, I had to go down with the chief of naval operations somewhere, and I'm like, this guy is so busy. He's in charge of the Navy, and I remember on the flight down on his plane, he spent the entire time talking to me, just talking to me, asking me, and he was getting ready to retire, and I sent him a thank you note afterwards saying, "Hey, CNO, thanks for spending so much time with me. I know you're a busy man, but I really appreciate all the mentoring and everything." And he said, "You know how you can pay me back? Make sure you do the same thing. Make sure that you do the same thing, that you give back, that you mentor people, that you reach out to people and take your time and care for people and helping them grow. And then the rewards in that will pay back, many times over." And he was exactly right.
And it's so beautiful to see that. We usually don't use beautiful in naval service, but it is a beautiful thing to see those that are at a level reach down and say, hey, it's okay. It's not that crazy up here. You're going to do okay, and you're going to get to a position one day where you'll be able to do this for someone else. Do it, right? And I
Yep.
both you and I shared that experience. I had master chiefs, command master chiefs that I looked up to, and they set the same things in motion where I could say, that's what I want to do for sure. And I also got told, hey, make sure you do it for them when they're coming up. And it has been a wonderful experience. Now, we all started before service as plain old citizens, in the United States and decided to serve. Things have changed through the years.
Yeah.
Climates have changed. Things have changed. So, talking about citizenship, in your opinion, where are we falling short as citizens, and how can we course correct?
Yeah, that's the hardest question. So I don't, I don't know that I would characterize it necessarily as falling short. I think it's a different world today than it was when you and I were growing up, and I do think it's one of the challenges the country faces, which is, in the in the post draft era, um, a smaller and smaller share of the country has either served themselves or had family members that served it. When we were growing up, because of World War One and World Two and the Vietnam, so, you know, and because of the draft, everybody had somebody they knew had served, an aunt, an uncle, a brother, a father, and that has changed with the all volunteer force, which I think we're with all volunteer force has a lot of goodness associated with it. And you just have to look at how the capability and what the military does today. But I do think um, I wouldn't call it the citizenship coming up short, but I would say that that the fact that a smaller percentage of the nation has served or knows somebody that served, um, I think that's a challenge. And I think I wish we would, I think we've got to think about how, how do we, how do we kind of change that? I'm not in any way saying we should, reinstitute the draft, but I do think, any opportunity we have um, to demonstrate what we're doing to the citizens, what we do as a nation, as a military to our citizenry, so they can see what we do, and anything we can do to work to recruit. I think the more of when people see what we do, um, and we can talk to them about service and why service is important and what it does for you individually. Not only you serve in the country, but how you grow as an individual. I think we've got to continue to have that conversation, people, and things like what you're doing with your podcast here. I think are critically important to reach maybe an audience who doesn't think about these sort of things. I would tell any kid today growing up, hey, look, if you're not sure what you want to do, join the military. Okay, even if it's just for 3, 4 years, just go to boot camp, go to OCS, whatever. And whether you serve 4 or 5 years or 39 years, you wore the cloth of this nation, and nobody can ever take that away from you. And I think I think when people do that, and I've never met anybody that's you know, I know so many of my friends that are ultra successful that only served for 4 or 5 years. That said, foundationally, that 4 or 5 years is the most important thing I did in my life. I'm sure you would say the same thing. Is you can't replace that. So I think we have to. I think we have to. I think we have to talk about it. I think we have to talk about the value of it. I think we have to talk about what it does for you individually, how you grow, mentally, morally, physically, all things that go along with that. And I get out into the schools, do things like this podcast, do things like the Act of Valor Foundation is doing to reach out to people. I just think we've got to continue to send that message forward. And when we do that, I think we'll get the right people that want to join and serve. And excuse my cough again. I think this message of service is so important, and that and to tell people that you can't replace that, no matter what else you do. And so um, spend some time serving your country. Even it doesn't even have to be in the military. There are other ways you can serve this country, and give back. And the returns are tenfold, a hundredfold, a thousandfold what you'll actually give that you'll get back yourself. So it's a really good question. Um, I would finish with, I served for 39 years, and I remember, there's a tendency to say that, hey, today's generation of kids is, just not like we used to be. My niece, my goddaughter, Katie, is married to a now an Army major, but who joined right after 9/11 and enlisted in the Army, and then was an EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, and worked his way up to E8 in about 8 years in the Army. But he was in Iraq uh, for a year at a time, every other year for 8 straight years. So, when people say to me, well, today's generation of kids, I'm going, that's baloney. Today's generation of kids is as good or better than we were then. They have, I think it's been underreported and people don't recognize over the last 20 years with all the wars we've been, how what an amazing job this generation of kids, young men and women in this country have done for us. And I think, the return on that investment is going to be felt over the next 20, 30 years because these kids have served and served in some pretty tight, tough situations and served extremely well. So I'm an optimist, and I think that the best days for this country are still ahead. I'm super excited about what this generation of kids today is has to offer going forward, and I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, and I agree. I've seen such value come out of this generation. And there's a lot to be said, and a lot of people do say Gen Z this and Gen X this and all the other things that come up in conversation. But for them to excel the way they have, even in the midst of the things that have been going on.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And so, yes, I also applaud them. Now, for those looking to find out more about you, where can the audience learn more about you and, things that you're currently doing?
Well, I hate to say it, there is somebody actually made a Wikipedia page for me. So if you really want to look me up, Vice Admiral Thomas Moore, you'd see my bio and stuff. I think if you go on the Navy website, my bio is still there. You can go on the on hi.com. My bio is there. There's a lot of old pictures of me running around. If you wanted to find out more about it, and look, if anybody wanted to, through LinkedIn or something, wanted to send me a note or wanted to have another conversation, I'd be happy for you to reach out to me. And as I said when we were talking about mentoring and giving back, I think it's one of the most important things we do. So if anybody in your audience has, would like to reach back out to me, please do that. And I promise you one thing: if you send me a note, I will respond because I just think that's really really important. So yeah, thanks for your time today, Sarah. It's a real pleasure chatting with you. Your questions are great and your commentary is good, and the Bob Feller Foundation's lucky to have you doing this for them.
Thank you so much for that. And folks, we'll put all the links necessary in the show notes for you to be able to reach out to the Admiral. Folks, for more information on the foundation, please visit us at our website, actofvaloraward.org. Thank you once again, Admiral, for being with me and having this chat. And on behalf of the Bob Feller Act of Valor Foundation, thank you all for joining us on this episode.